Today, I'm talking to Eric Lavey with Sotheby's International Realty in Beverly Hills. Selling over $90 million a year, Eric has been named by the Los Angeles Business Journal as one of the top 75 residential real estate agents. He is also recognized frequently by the Wall Street Journal and the Hollywood Reporter. Talking to Eric, it becomes clear that he has an approach that is authentic and gets to solutions quickly. We talk about how to win by getting to the truth and cutting out fear. Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast was created for real estate agents across the country to come together, sharing ideas to take your, their, and our business to the next level. All right, everybody, it's the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today we have, from the Sotheby's office in Beverly Hills, Eric Lavey. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jere. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. So, you and we met through the Sotheby's network. Obviously, you've got a big name. You came to Sotheby's recently from another really big company, and excited to share everything we can get out of you on how you've become such a successful agent. So let's start with, tell us a little bit about where you are now and how you got in the business.
Where I am now? Well, I'm in my office in Beverly Hills.
Well, I mean, in business, like.
So, and of course, I've been in real estate. I've been a licensed real estate broker for 22 years. And I started in Boston, and I was in college, and I got my license there, and I sort of, didn't take it seriously. I was in school. It was a means to an end. I was coming off of selling cellular telephones, and at the time nobody had a cellular telephone, and so that's when the telephone was like $1,000 for a StarTAC. If you know what Google StarTAC, anyone who's under the age of 40, and so I had that as a job in college before real estate, and so and I just sort of went into real estate. Somebody that I knew told me about it and said, hey kid, you should get your license. And this is in Boston on Newbury Street, and so I did, and sort of I got hired by some friend, now friends of mine, Diane and Jimmy Kelleher. Kelleher is on Newbury Street, Kelleher Real Estate. Paul Ronkulis was the person who sort of got me in the business back there. I graduated college from Emerson, and when I left there, I went to Los Angeles, and I never thought of real estate ever again. It was never even a thought. My goal was to come in and get into the entertainment world out here. And that's to Los Angeles. And so that was 21 years ago. And I started off in the William Morris mailroom, and which is a talent agency, and then worked my way through there and ended up at UTA, which is another major talent agency. And then sort of after 5 years and working with actors, writers, directors, I didn't have a passion for it. I didn't really care about sort of entertainment, really. I didn't want to read scripts. I didn't want to do any of that. And so I realized, maybe I can get back into real estate. And so everyone thought I was nuts at the time. There was no TV shows on the air about selling real estate. There was nothing sexy about our business. And it was sort of like an embarrassment of sorts. I was a little embarrassed, but I went to a lot of my bosses at the time, and shockingly, most of them said, Eric, I'm a little jealous because this is a tough business. And I'm, at the time I was 25, and they might have been 37, 42. And they said, Eric, I can't do that. I've got 2 kids, and I've got a family, but I think you're doing the right thing. And some people said, Eric, you're crazy. You worked your way up through here, so crazy, but how can you leave us? I said, look, no offense. I love it here, but I just don't want to do it. So then I got into the business and struggled for a bit like everybody else. And that was about 16 years ago.
Wow. That was how many, 16 years ago?
16 years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I got in about 17 years ago at 26. And I think the biggest thing everybody said for the young listeners that we have is get into sales young, because that's, getting in young helps. But getting in young is tough because you're young. So 25 years old, you're officially a real estate agent after 5 years of being in talent agencies and realizing this business, the end result looks good, but the journey of it is not for me.
I think it was the opposite, by the way. I liked the journey. The end result was kind of boring. It was like, who wants that, you know?
Like by the time you get the part,
yeah, it's just like not worth it.
This isn't what the show's about, but often I've watched people who are in Hollywood and it's so glamorous in the magazines, and I'm like, they're like on site for hours.
Yeah.
We have clients now coming here from LA doing that, and I'm like, they're like cooped up on site for hours reading lines.
Nothing glamorous about entertainment, that's for sure.
So you're anymore, right? So now you're in real estate. You got into it. How, like you said, you struggled a bit, but kind of what were your lessons learned, and how did you get that traction to become successful?
Yeah, so looking back, you sort of, it's always hard to think about the early days because, those of us who had success and worked really hard for it, it is easy to forget how you started it out. Sometimes you block it out for the right reasons or not. But, when I started, and again, I came out of that entertainment, fast-paced talent agency world. And at the time, the talent agency world, that was before it was super corporate. It was really just a very competitive shark eat shark. So like, people say, oh, wow, like, you came into real estate, it was, less sharky. And I was like, no, not at all. Actually, I think real estate's more sharky. But at the time I had to just sort of work my contacts that I had made the last few years in Los Angeles at the time. And my biggest regret was I did a terrible job at that. I think the reason was you sort of, when you leave I think this happens to a lot of people that I talk to. When you leave a major brand, when you can sort of call and say, hey, it's Eric Lavey calling from UTA or from William Morris. Anybody takes your call. I mean, in the old days, I mean, you call from William Morris or CAA or UTA, I could get, and I did get, the craziest people on a phone call that I had no business getting on a phone call, even out of entertainment. I just dropped that name after my name and your call's returned. As soon as you leave that world, you don't understand how that all goes away. And so you have to really start by just saying, I'm Eric Lavey, and what does that mean? So that's what I learned quickly. And I think I was a little sort of, sort of embarrassed from leaving the business, and you think it's a failure scenario. And at the time, again, it wasn't like a cool thing to do to go into real estate. And nowadays, it's a cool thing to get into the business. But I just had to work really hard and, work open houses and work the smallest leads possible. I was talking to one of my coaches recently, and we talked about sort of my trajectory over the last 15 years. And I certainly, I think, am a representative of the fact of never getting an immediate jump. Some people, I think, hop in the business and they have immediate success. That was not me. I had these little plateaus every 3 years, painful plateaus sometimes, but that's how you build I think a strong foundation.
Yeah. And I think interesting because you talk about building a strong foundation. I hear about Bill Fandel. I think you're friends with Bill. I think you know Bill too, and Telluride, but he talks about he knows everybody. And he talks about some of these agents that he's met and they came in too fast and easy. I was like, oh, that was great. And then they find out how hard it is. So sometimes that can be an advantage. Did you find that might have been the case that like kind of kept you in and kept you building that traction and momentum? Or?
Yeah, if I look back, I get in like the 0405 days, and the market's still quite hot here in most of the country, of course, and that was pre-collapse. And then a couple of years in, and we're in a major situation, and then here we are in 08, 9, and 10. And I remember thinking to myself, great, what am I going to do now? And I had that moment for just a second of a thought, because after that, I just said, I'm going to persevere and I'm going to win. And so I truly believe at the time, I looked at those moments when I was growing my business in 8, 9, 10, and 11, and then came out of that and exploded in 12, 13, and then had these continual explosions. That helped. You had to make it happen. And a lot of agents that I respected, by the way, didn't make it out, and I was shocked.
So two things. I heard you say one of your coaches, so I want to talk about that. But first, everybody else is probably more interested in hearing about
you kind of built traction slowly, and you talked about you went through the recession and you got a few explosions. What do you think, because you've got these people who are in the business and had been doing well who didn't make it, and you kind of had to struggle your way through. What's the difference between you and them?
At the time, it was probably youth. Let's be honest. You know,
Right.
so that's not anything that I had control over, but it was just a fortunate moment in time. That's one for, Jere. You know, look, I think when you grow in those moments, you have very little overhead. I was a single guy I didn't have any money, and I lived in an apartment, right? And so, and as I think back now to those days, it sounds so amazingly romantic. But
Not when you're living it.
Right, exactly. We want to get out of that. But, I have an ability to refuse to lose. And so that's sort of in my DNA. And There was never a moment that I thought, I'm not going to figure it out. And even today, as I look back, and people in my life and in my business world and my personal world always say, like, it's remarkable how in the toughest times, you figure out a way. And there's always a way to figure it out. And, I'm not a feel sorry for yourself person. I don't dwell on it. If I have a bad day, that's going to end with that day. We're not taking into the next day. We're just not doing it.
I love that. When we have a bad day, we're not taking it the next day. So I'm going to get super cheesy on my metaphors, but tennis. I suck at tennis because every time I get a bad one, I'm like,
Great,
and then it's like the next ball came by and I missed that one too.
Yeah. I'm a tennis player. So I can tell you that, if you think about that point or the 3 points before, you're going to lose the match. It's not like you have no chance of winning that match because it's all psychological and emotional. And
our business is the same.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So you talked about your coaches. Let's touch on that. Well, one more question before we go on the coaches. What you mentioned too, like it sounds like you had this build up. And then you hit the recession. It was like, oh my God, like if we could just make this, it felt like it would never end. And then these explosions, what triggered each of these explosions in your business? What do you think and how do you have any stories from that you would share with us?
Yeah, I think back to sort of those days 10 years ago. And it was you just pushed through every day. And you pushed through every day, you worked every lead, and you didn't give up on any deal. And you had to get crafty and you had to just stick to it. And you had to realize that I look back today even and like, we're probably never going to see that. I know we're in the middle of something we've never seen before, but so far it's nothing like what we went through back then. That was a longer period. And that was a fundamental global collapse. And thinking back to like, of course I was somebody who didn't have any sellers. So you had to work with buyers, and buyers didn't want to buy anything. So you had to figure out who was a real buyer and work the real buyers because that's how you get paid. And I think where I probably built my business was with other brokers, mostly listing brokers, who I looked up to when I first came into business, and they were suffering. And I would bring buyers and I would get deals done. And I think I got known, as I've been told down the line, I get known as a deal maker early on and somebody that wouldn't give up. The funny thing is, I remember, and whenever I think of that moment, I think of these deals, and I think about a deal that I did with somebody at Sotheby's at the time, who's still here in this office, by the way, and he's been here for a long, long time. And I remember asking him, and he was one of the biggest guys in the business at the time, in Los Angeles, revered. Yeah. And I'm like, oh man, I mean, like this is, and I'm a kid. And so I said, look, and I was trying to present the facts of why this house in the hills was not worth 3.5, it was worth 2.8, and here's why. And today I would approach that differently. But he said, okay, Eric, why don't you come in and present to them in the office? And that was downstairs where I'm sitting right now, exactly downstairs. That was where the office for Sotheby's was. And I remember walking in as a 20-something-year-old with all my sort of background of why this property was not going to sell for 3.5 or 3.2. And I did it. And he sat there and just let me present and And it went quite well, and we got the deal done. We opened up escrow, and he said, "You did a really good job there." And I was petrified because I was out of my element. And I think at that moment I realized, okay, it doesn't matter, how big somebody is. And I think he looked at it as, wow, this is a young guy who just wants to, be a deal maker, and that's it.
So I love, because you talk about you made deals and you weren't afraid to get out of your element. And being a deal maker, honing in on that, so many people in this business I hear say, at whatever level, how am I going to get them to hire me?
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I have a little bit of that same mentality of, I'm not waiting for people to hire me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get a deal done.
Yeah.
You get the deal done, you get known as that, and then people start coming after you. It sounds like that's kind of what you're...
Yeah, look, I think every one of us wants to get people to do something early on, or sometimes the whole career, and I think it's a mistake. And we learn the right way to think that way, whether it's a year in or 25 years, it depends. Hopefully it's earlier than later. First and foremost, you can't get anybody to do anything. They're going to do what they want to do. But I think now, what I always think about the last probably 5 years of my business and my career, it has been a sense of, I'm not for everybody and everybody's not for me. And that's a tough thing to sort of accept early on. I think, we want it all, right? I mean, nobody wants to let something go. That's called fear of loss, right? And so, Chris Voss talks about fear of loss. I don't want to get to a place of fear, because if I get to a place of fear, I come from a place of imbalance and I can't really have an advantage. But I'm not looking to convince somebody to hire me. And I don't even look at it as they're hiring me. We're going to work together, because first and foremost, I don't get a salary. So unless I'm getting hired with a salary, I'm not getting hired to do anything. We're in business together, and, we either
That
fit.
was well put.
Yeah.
That was really well put. The way you just said that. So many people think we're getting hired.
Yeah.
And I've never heard it that way or said it that way, but I have. Maybe our common denominator of Chris Voss has helped that. I read his book, and the two messages I got, he never said it, but the two common denominators of everything he says are, don't be defensive and don't be desperate.
Yeah.
Or as you just said, you get yourself in a place of imbalance, which is defensive or desperate. Yeah. And you can't, there's no advantage in that.
No, and you always try to chase something. And look, I know it's easy for people like us who have a really successful business in real estate to say, don't chase the business, or who cares, there's more out there. I get it. It's, you're probably thinking, if you're watching this or hearing this, that, yeah, they make a lot of money doing what they do. But I mean, it's going to start somewhere, and it starts when you are ready to have it start. And so I learned that about 5 years ago with one of my coaches that I got introduced to Chris Voss through, Steve Scholl. And I've been coaching with him for like 8 years, and there's enough business out there. There's just enough business. We're not for everybody.
So tell us a little bit about, you said one of your coaches.
Sure.
Between all the business you do, how do you have time for several coaches? And
That's
how do you have multiple coaches, and what for?
That's what I say sometimes. I'm like, how do I have time for these coaches? I don't need all of these coaches. But, I have two main coaches, and I look at the Chris Voss as sort of like the 2.5, right? Because Steve Scholl is who works with Chris, and I've worked with Chris for 3 years with him. And then I have a Tom Ferry coach, and which is a very different sort of component of what they do.
Different style. Yeah.
It's a different style. It's more technical. It's more real estate centric. Whereas, Steve in performance coaching is more of like a holistic approach to, who we are and the way we do it. And there's no, look, I think I think Tom is great, and I love him, and the coaches are wonderful, and they are a clinically solid coaching program, but it's all the same for everybody. And that's okay. Some people need the same stuff as everybody else in our real estate world, but I think not everybody is the same in terms of what our approach is and how we reach success and how we prepare for success. And so, for me, as an example, I am not a structured person. I'm highly disciplined, but you're not going to see me, running my CRM because, Angelica's running my CRM and telling me what I need to do. And that's the way it works. Because if I had to sit on my computer, I'm not connecting with my clients and friends and discovering more business and growing the business and making us all money.
Exactly. So everybody, kind of to your point, is it Mike? This is embarrassing. Mike Ferry.
Tom Ferry.
I mean, Tom Ferry. Mike. Yeah. Like seriously, I know everybody, but Mike is his son.
Mike is his father. Very difficult. Door knocking, old school. Like I can't even relate to it.
I mean, I know who they are. Yeah. Okay. So Tom Ferry is kind of like make your calls, go out there, get your business. That's kind of
I think the Tom Ferry program it's very much it's sort of a show, and like this, he does videos every day, and it's a little robotic for me, to be honest. And I'm not trying to knock Tom or the coaches.
But that gives structure to an unstructured person, and then you've got Steve Scholl,
which is
boss, who are.
It's holistic in its thinking. And
what are your strengths? I find every successful agent is successful because they've tapped into their greatest strengths and brought them into this business.
I think anyone I think anybody, whether you're successful or just semi-successful or moderately successful, I think you have some strengths. I think, when I think about what my strengths are, I think one that comes to mind is probably I welcome difficult conversations, and I don't shy from them. And I get excited for them. And I think that,
most people by sheer human nature, and you might disagree with me on this, don't really like difficult conversations. No. How did you, was that in your DNA, or is that something you learned and found out you're good at?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some of that is DNA driven. I don't shy away from confrontation, right? And I could be an aggressive person by nature, but I also don't like confrontation that's not necessary, first and foremost, which is why I think I like a difficult conversation. I also am really comfortable in awkward situations. So I think difficult conversation.
That's it. End of interview right there. Comfortable in awkward situations. That's all we need to know.
Yeah, I think it's because most people are not. And so if you can excel in something that people are not, there's an advantage, right? And so on a competitive level, you will win there. But when you're thinking about a difficult conversations are where things either get resolved and move forward, or they don't. And if you don't move it forward, you really have stalemate and you don't have any progress or a result. So the difficult conversation, you have to be up for it. It's the same way, Steve Scholl, my coach, he was a Pro Bowl, the defensive end for the Miami Dolphins, played for Don Shula. And so, there's a lot of that in that coaching. And we talk about, being up for the game. And you may not be the most talented on the ground, but there's no way to really say I'm not the best. So every day you've got to come with that and say, okay, I get this. And of course, be equipped to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
I've been liking them for a long time, but until I started to coach really with Chris and Steve on tactical empathy, as we've always talked about, they haven't been as effective. And now the last few years, you can have a very brief but effective, difficult conversation in a couple of sentences sometimes.
Well, less can be a lot more.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
if you ask them the questions.
As most listeners know, I'm a really big fan of Chris Voss and that book that I've read 7 times.
Yeah, he's the best.
So on these difficult conversations going into that, I think that's interesting because I didn't like difficult conversations at all. They seemed to turn into misunderstandings until I was equipped. For you, why did you like him before and what changed after, and what did you learn about? You gave us a little bit of you've got to be ready for the game, but what are those things that get you ready? But do tell me the difference between before you really learned it, when you were doing it up from your gut, and when you got those tools.
So I think early on, somebody that has an aggressive streak and aggressive nature and is not really fearful of a lot, it's being up for the moment. And
So
so
you jumped out of a few airplanes or something? Like,
no, I would never do that. That's the dumbest thing ever.
that's just dumb.
It's
Okay.
just dumb.
So anyway,
Honest.
I just
No,
want to see how much of an adrenaline junkie you are.
no, not at all. But for me, it's like, okay, this is the moment. And if you're going to do anything that is competitive, and what we do is highly competitive, and every year it gets more competitive, that is the moment. Those difficult conversations are going to define who you are in your business and probably who in your life when they all add up. And is one going to change your life? Probably not. It may if it's the right one, but probably not. But if you add 10, 20, 50, 100 of them up in a span of 5 or 10 years, that's going to make up who you are and who people perceive you as and what they'll mark you as. So do you want to be marked as the agent who, is highly emotional and a jerk? Or do you want to be labeled as the one who's very clinical and can't look around and out of the box? Or do you want to be, and so I wanted to be looked at as someone who says, look, it's not about ego. Putting the ego aside is the first and foremost thing, I think, to be really crafty at difficult conversations. Because there's nothing I can go into where if they think I'm a knucklehead, if they think I'm obnoxious, I'm okay with that. I mean, like, what's the worst that can happen? Someone thinks I'm obnoxious. It's happened before. It'll happen probably again.
Right.
So you can't be fearful of what the result will be. So for going into those, you just have to know that, okay, and we're all, there's a lot of people who do what we do. They're really smart. And so you got to put the ego aside and put the perception aside and say, what's the best way to attack this problem? And so that's early on for me, what those difficult conversations were. And also I like when people there's an awkwardness to difficult conversations. And I weirdly like to be in awkward situations because I believe there's a moment of advantage there.
Here's what I wonder, because when I hear you say that, if you read my profile, like the Crystal Nose profile, apparently I don't like confrontation.
Huh?
But I don't know that that's true. I try to withhold because once I am there, I have to be careful not to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to piss anybody off. Because once it's
Yeah.
there, I'm there.
I get
to
it.
your point, I wonder is it you say awkwardness, but there's that point of awkwardness that breaks through to authenticity.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, and that's another thing I think you have in your DNA or you don't. Like, I don't think you can become authentic. At times I've been too authentic in who I am. Look, I'm from a small little village in New England where people are pretty aggressive by nature. So if you put me in my little village where I'm from, I'm kind of like a lot of people. But you put me in sort of a cosmopolitan place like Los Angeles, New York, or it becomes, well, New York's a different story because like whenever I'm talking with New Yorkers, I know I'm on the same level of aggressive.
But in LA, like, is there even grit there? I mean, if it's below 70,
super chill.
Right.
Super chill here.
Completely different.
Yeah. And so I think you sort of go into that and say, okay, are you going to be okay with the outcome here?
So, yeah, that's a whole nother kind of part of that, learning that and maybe being in LA. But in LA, so now you kind of had this natural gut for getting to the awkwardness. I say to get the authenticity or to get to the root of the solution. On the flip side, what changed after you met Chris, worked with Steve, had experience in these difficult situations to see your mistakes? Kind of what's that transitioned into now?
It transitions in this last few years into being a severely active listener. And if that is not at the forefront of what you are trying to do every day, in every type of communication with people, by the way, because we can talk all day long about real estate, but if you're not practicing it in your life, then it's really hard to turn it on and off. So if you're not active listening, then you really can't fully practice with that tactical empathy and
so
problem solving.
Active listening.
Yeah.
People hear that word, and again, not to tout Chris Voss, have been held back a little bit lately, but that is, you read that book 7 times, and you learn a little bit about it. What is active? I think if you haven't done it, a lot of people think they know what that is. What is that?
Yeah, I guess the maybe the easy way to describe that would be, without getting to what Chris would describe it as, or how he describes tactical empathy, because he has a very particular definition. But I think active listening is not coming into that conversation or that moment ready with the next thing. As real estate agents, the best of us have been shown scripts and dialogue, right? And those of us who've been in the business for 20, 30, 40, 50 years have a bunch of their scripts and dialogue, and they think it's so brilliant. And well, that's trying to push someone to do something and trying to push a conversation a certain way. Active listening, you have no idea what you're in for. You really don't. So if you're not actively listening and not thinking about anything else, and this is so hard. I mean, it's hard for me today when I walk into a room. I find myself sometimes not being active. I'm listening and I'm thinking about the next thing I'm going to say. Then I'm blowing the whole sit down, because I need to hear everything from start to finish and then think about what that's about. And I'm there to find out. And so I'm always there to find out. And before Voss, my coach, Steve, we talked about getting to the truth. And getting to the truth was a way to say, what is somebody willing to do? And whether it's a seller, a buyer, or whatever, because we have to know what the truth is. If we don't know what the truth is, we're there doing the dance, trying to get the business, and we don't know if there's business to be had. So as an active listener, it's truly being in the moment and having a conversation. And I think if you're somebody who loves interacting with people, then it's probably a little bit easier. And I find myself as somebody I like humanity. Most of the time. Sometimes I don't like humanity, but most of the time, it's fascinating to have a conversation with the people and just hear what's going on in there. I can learn from them. I don't want to hear me talk. I want to hear them talk.
Yeah. So because I think this is so important in our business. I'd love to hear you talk about it. So many people pass over this for so long, the script business. I'm like, why are you scripting? Where's the listening?
Sure.
Do you find, because a few things you said, if I didn't know what I know, you go into a conversation and you don't really know where it's going to go. Why would you want to go into a conversation and not know where it's going to go? How do you get the result if you do that?
It's that sounds so strange to me. I mean, it's okay to not know. I mean, and of course we all want to prepare, for 10 years, 15 years at most, I was preparing listing presentations, and which is laugh because it's so foolish. I don't prepare listing presentations. No one's preparing listing presentations in my office, because you know why? I'm the presentation first and foremost, and they don't care. Yeah. They don't. People want to bring in the book, and it's fancy book, and it's let me show you some charts and why we're so amazing and why everyone's looking at us. And here's me. I'm going to brag a little bit about me. Here's more about me. And how about that about me? That's pretty great, isn't it? That newspaper article about me, it's amazing. No one cares. Nobody cares about this. And so now, the last few years, I walk in with zero things. Okay. I'm not bringing a book. I'm not bringing anything, because I want to find out. I want to truly see what's going on. And sometimes I'll say, look, you probably thought I was going to come and do a presentation. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what the other agents came in with the other agents came in and talked to you about all the advertisements that, yeah. Sounds like that's the most important thing to you. Actually, it's not. Okay. So, Jere, would it be crazy to think we could just talk about the most important things to you? Not at all. Let's do that. And moving on. And that of course, that's something that, we learned with Chris and Steve, but I will never present anything anymore, because it doesn't matter. No one cares. Look, it's Sotheby's. It's fancy. I sell a lot of houses. You see me on different articles. I get it. You can just Google me. It's fine. But we're going to either get each other or we're not. And it's not going to be about selling in that room. It's going to be about finding out what's important to them and then discussing if we're the right fit. And there's been times I'm like, oh, wow, this is not the right fit. In the old, Eric would have said, let's just get the listing, put the sign up. And this, I had a meeting last week, and they called me because they couldn't sell their house. They sold another 3 houses in the neighborhood. And we met, and I was like, whoa, we're definitely not the right fit.
Did you say that in the meeting?
Sometimes I have, but it seems like, Joe, I might not be the right fit for you. And then if you say that, by the way, it's like, it's like when you were single in the old days, telling the girl, it's not you, it's me. And then all of a sudden they are, how dare you say like, you don't want to work with me? We're going to work together. Okay, fine, we're going to work together. But I like to not get into that. I just like to say, oh, one sounds wonderful, and just walk away, never follow up. That's the way I would do that, because I don't need to have that conversation.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, have you ever had a meeting where because I've had listings where I'm like, this client may not be the one, and then I get hired and they end up being not so bad, like some of the best.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that kind of, but it breaks through all that ice early. Have you ever had that happen, or do you kind of know when you know from the act of listening?
Look, I think, especially in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills environs, we have some pretty special people. What I mean by that is like a lot of interesting characters. And, whether someone's really successful or moderately successful, they have certain ways they like to communicate. And I don't want to hold it against them, because I'd probably be the same as a consumer. So, and I can guarantee you, if I had an agent come and meet with me, they'd be like, yeah, because this guy really want to work with me, who knows? But I like a challenge also. I like nice people. I like smart people. So I think early on in those meetings, if I have a sense of a red flag, I might say something like, sounds like you feel real estate brokers are really overpaid. And I want them to say like, no, that's not what I'm talking about, Okay, so let's talk about that. And I want to get it off the table, and that's, by the way, I learned that in debate class at Emerson College, putting the toughest thing on the table. Let's talk about it right here, right now, or my weakness on the table. So that way no one else talks about it after that. So, but I will sort of go after that or explore more if I think it's a little troubling, because I don't want to go on the road, at least not knowing. If I'm going to go on the road, I want to know. I'll tell my team, I'll say, look, this is going to get pretty intense. It's a great house. We believe in the house. This is a person who's going to be tricky, but we deal with a lot of tricky personalities. Yeah. And I think that's why, that's what, there's an old line in Mad Men from 10 years ago, and, that's what the money's for. And that's how that works. Mad Men's
the best. Yeah.
So
talk about keeping it real. That show is, it's like so politically incorrect.
Yeah, so it's amazing. Yeah.
So, not to beat a dead horse on this, but I think you said something that triggered some things for me when you talked about like two things you really focused on were find out and get to the truth. So I remember, I think I've said this on this show, of the 160 something episodes, maybe once before, I'm not a big Tony Robbins person, but I'm fascinated with his ability to pull things out of people around thousands of people. And I remember watching him over and over to figure out what it is. And I thought, that guy's not afraid of the truth.
No, it's funny. I'm not a Tony Robbins guy. You're not going to find me in a Tony Robbins. It's not for me.
I don't see that in you. Yeah.
No, look, I have a lot of friends who are highly successful people who swear by it. Not my style. It's all good. But I think it comes to, pulling the truth out. You sort of just feel like, okay, like you're not afraid to hear a response. So you're not afraid to see the result of something. And we've heard that before of like, not being attached to the outcome. So,
do you think in the traditional sense of real estate, people might be afraid to hear the truth because there's so much pressure to just get the deal? And if the deal can't be done, that truth is something they just want to hurdle over and alter reality somehow?
Well, yeah, I think it's, when people sort of push through something at any level, whether you're pushing through your marriage or you're pushing through, a business partnership or you're pushing through a deal, sometimes it's not meant to happen. And, you can't make people do what they don't want to do. So, and I don't care how good you think you are at spinning and packaging and, and I think we all as salespeople in general, I used to always resent the term salesperson or, I just thought it was dirty. And then I started to get comfortable with the idea of like, who am I kidding? I'm selling fancy homes and like, I don't know how to pitch this. I sell real estate. I don't know. So, and I get comfortable with it. So, but I think in today's world, you really, and I think the generations that we're going to be working with, which is, sort of the people that are younger than us, the couple, the Gen Ys and all those millennials, they don't want to be sold to. And so I think having a conversation and advising them on what it sounds like they want is the way to go. At the end of the day, I mean, like if that's not what they really mean, they're going to say it. Great. So we can move on and get clear. Getting clear is always the key. You get clear, then you can figure out the next step.
And you can figure out if you can help them and get them what they really want.
Well, yeah. Or, have them help them figure out what they actually do want because they can articulate it. And that happens a lot when I think people say, I'm thinking of this, so it sounds like you want that. Well, no. Well, okay. Well, so, what do you think? Actually, no, the more you think of it, yeah, actually, I think I do want this instead. Great. So we go on that road. A lot of people don't know what they want.
Do you find where do you find as a real estate agent, where are we most valuable? How are we most valuable?
I think we are most valuable. It's not a one word answer, or one sentence answer, but I think we're most valuable with removing the emotion from the transaction. And I think that's ultimately why I've never, ever thought we had any danger of becoming extinct. I truly believe it. And I could be the most, naive, overly optimistic person in a business, but I truly don't know how some of these deals would ever get done on a computer or through a Zillow or through an app with the personalities.
Yeah, everybody thought, especially like Zillow or whatever you want to call it, like technology, but Zillow was a big one. Everybody's like, well, what do you need a realtor for now? Yeah. And it seems that since then, the realtors have become even more valuable. I feel like we've become more valuable to our clients because of that. They need somebody to interpret all that and guide them through it as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah. And some, look, I think about, the deals that we have going now and that we've had this year and the years before. I mean, most of the deals involve people who are very successful people and have huge egos. And so sometimes you've got to get the egos out of the room and diffuse the egos. And look, there's been times that I've, by design, put two parties in a room or on a call without me or without their broker. And that takes our ego out of it because a lot of brokers were like, I'm not doing that. I want to control the situation. Yeah. Not your situation, by the way. That's the biggest mistake brokers make, is that they're part of the deal. We're not part of the deal at all. And you can sort of do that and you can remove the egos, a deal gets done. But they're not getting in a room together, or they're certainly not going to come to terms on something if they've got big egos on their own. It's just usually not going to work.
I found when you let them get on the phone without you, that's when they realize, that's when they get the experience of really needing you before they get on the call, after the call, and wanting you to get back into it. Yeah. Because they realize what you're doing for them.
Look, whenever I think we have a total stalemate, ultimately the deal making is what's most fun about what we do. Okay. And ultimately when we get two parties, sometimes you double end. We do a lot of both side stuff, and that can be really fun. And sort of, you lose like 5 pounds during the deal. And so, my feeling is,
you just opened a can of worms on that one, but we're going to have to close it out because I know you're running out of time, but go ahead.
But I think if you get the parties, to understand that this is not about an ego, it's in getting them to understand what the fear of loss is. And that ties that right back together. What are the parties' fear of loss? So in a negotiation, and look, we are entering a moment, I think, that's going to be define who brokers really are. Can they get
technology or COVID-19 or?
No, none of that. This is about negotiation, and it's discovering what people are willing to do and what they're willing to not do. And if someone's like, look, I'm only paying 5.8, not paying anymore, not paying 5.850. Okay, sounds like you were willing to walk away from this house and not live in this house. Well, no. And that's not what I'm saying, Eric. I'm 5.8 my number. Okay, so if it sounds like if this seller is not willing to budge in $50,000, you don't want the house. Well, no, I want the house. And so, okay, so 5.850, we can get this done if it really takes that. Yeah, okay, we can do that. And so those conversations, instead of saying, just go to 5.850, just go to 5.850, That's never going to work.
That's no,
That
yeah.
person does not want to be pushed. I can
Then
tell you.
they're not going to buy the house for
No way.
$5,850.
It's going to be
Make a point.
ego. But if you have them understand the fear of loss is not getting the house.
Yeah.
That the spouse maybe is like, I want the house, make it happen. And they're not letting you know what's going on. But like, you want the house, so no, it sounds like you're okay letting this house go away and having someone else buy this. In a multiple offer scenario, sounds like you're okay to have this buyer pay $5,850 and walk away. Well, no, like, so it's not like you'd be really angry with that. Yeah, I'd be pissed. Okay, so should we figure out how to get that done? And so like there's
so many times in our business where that conversation needs to be had that way.
Yeah, but no one does it. Most people don't do it that way because it takes you to step back a bit and sort of think about things of just the way people interpret and the way people feel.
To do what you just did, you got to take yourself out of you got to really get yourself out.
You have to.
Getting your ego out.
And also not be attached to the outcome. You have to be okay with them saying, Eric, I am not having any problems with somebody buying that house for $5,850. Sounds like you were really, really convicted on that, John. Eric, I am. Got it. Good to know. So now I found out what's going on. So he's ready to rock and roll out of that serial.
Found out and got to the truth.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
All right, now we're going to do our final 3 questions. Number 1, what do you think is your most powerful tool in being a successful real estate agent?
Powerful tool. I think it's. I think it's the fact that I'm okay taking ego out of it. And we already talked about that, but I think that's probably the biggest when we're in a big ego-driven world. I think so.
Listening to you, I think it's not just you're okay with it. You know how to do it. A lot of people don't know how to do it. It takes a little discipline and understanding. Yeah. Next question. If there's a book or person that has most impacted your career and that we have to read, what is that?
It's obviously, Chris's book, Never Split the Difference. There's no other blueprint that is so built for a business that I think built for any really sort of negotiating in life. And I don't just mean negotiating a deal, but sort of negotiating your own life and sort of navigating your own life to being okay with what the truth really is. But that's the book for sure, in my opinion, right now for me.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that about me, but I learned that book through this show. I think I had 8 recommendations on that final 3 question that I was like, God, I guess I got to read it. And then I couldn't quit reading it or quit talking about it.
Yeah, I've been very lucky, of course, to work with Chris directly for a long time, and have 2 days, back to back, just together in a conference table and just going through these things, and that's a hard thing, by the way. You get in front of Chris, and then I'm just like frustrated because it's not going where I want it to go, and like that's when you really learn a lot, to be honest.
Yeah. All right, last question. If there's one thing we should remember from this interview, if we're just not going to be able to remember anything else, what is it?
Embrace the difficult conversation. Embrace a difficult conversation and don't shy away. And it's our nature to be fearful of something that's challenging and not want it to happen, and try to do your best to put it off. The more you put off the difficult conversation, the more it's going to be a problem and more difficult conversation down the line.
And difficult.
Yeah.
Outcome.
Yes. Bad outcome. You're not going to like it.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for a great interview. That was awesome.
Thank you, Jere, for having me, and we'll talk soon.